Hi everybody, it's Mrs. Jennifer and I'm ready to read a couple more chapters for us out of The Lost Planet. Um, we're down to about 6 chapters, I think. So we'll probably do this 2 more times after this week and then the book will be finished. So I hope you've enjoyed it. It's been something I probably wouldn't have read myself. So it's been good for me to experience what a bluebonnet book would be like, because this is a Texas bluebonnet. So it's been good for me. It's let me read something that I wouldn't have read on my own. So thank you for that. If you remember last week, I got to look at my notes because I forget. Last week we found out that Parker and Mina are okay. We know that Captain Leonard from the Federation doesn't like Chase, and he knows he isn't who he says he is. He knows that he's not really the Chase that everybody thinks he is. But we still don't know if Marius is alive or not, since all of this has changed. So we'll start with chapter 19. Chase stared at the door of his cell. He had a plan. It wasn't a great plan. It wasn't even a good plan, and it depended on his belief that he had the ability to evade grabbing hands, blaster shots, and whatever else might await him in the halls of the starship. But first he had to get through that cell door. Mina was in one of the 2 cells to his left. He had seen them bring her in not long after Captain Leonard had left him. Parker wasn't with her, so Chase guessed he was back in the medical bay, wherever that was. He hadn't heard anything about Marius and wondered with a sick feeling in his gut if he had already been tried and executed. He knew if he was able to break Mina out, they wouldn't have time to look for Marius. He hoped they'd be able to find Parker. His plan didn't extend much further than that. He pressed his hands flat against the door. It certainly felt solid. Impulsively, he knocked his head against the metal surface. It bounced off with a dull thud. "Ow!" he muttered, rubbing the tender spot. He was crazy for thinking he could escape. He had no idea how to control his phasing if that's what he could do. Nibbling doubts crept up, questioning his memories. Maybe there had been a weak spot on that container door. Maybe the head shackles had been left open. Maybe the blade the girl had plunged into his neck was a fake, a gag knife that retracted into the handle. He closed his eyes and thought of the horrible coldness he had felt when she stabbed him, and remembered her pale, furious face. No wonder she had been so shocked. Seeing her own brother strolling around on Quasar was after she had witnessed his death. She had to be terrified. She couldn't be more than 10 years old. He imagined her crouched alone in some dark corner, scavenging for food. He couldn't let Leonard get her. Chase opened his eyes and positioned himself so he could just barely see out of the cell door's window to where the guard sat behind a console looking bored. It was time. "Hey!" he shouted. The guard didn't react. The cells were nearly soundproof. Chase tried again, yelling and pounding on the wall. The guard looked up from his desk and frowned. As soon as Chase caught the guard's eye, he staggered away from the door, groaning. He dropped on one hand and his head with the other. The soldier's face appeared in the window. Chase shook his head frantically and wailed. The guard began to step away from the door, back toward his console, probably to call for help. Not good. Chase screamed at the top of his lungs, slid from the bench, and flailed on the floor. It worked. The guard waved his badge at the door and rushed to Chase's side. The door slid shut behind him. "What's the matter?" Still thrashing, Chase eyed the soldier's badge hanging on a cord around his neck. Could he snap it? Probably not. He wiggled and contorted himself into position, knees drawn to his chest, and launched his feet into the soldier's stomach. With a surprised "oof!" the soldier doubled over and fell back against the wall, stunned. Chase sprang to his feet, yanked the badge up from around the soldier's neck, and waved it against the door's sensor. Nothing happened. "Nice try," wheezed the soldier. "Drop it and put your hands out where I can see them." Chase glanced back at the door, clutching the badge in his hand. It was now or never. He would have to try jumping through the door. He wasn't sure if he'd be able to take the badge with him, but his clothes seemed to make the journey every time, so it was worth a try. Pressing the badge tight against his chest, Chase closed his eyes and ran at the door. A wave of stinging numbness washed through him, and Chase tumbled to the floor outside his cell. Nausea curled his stomach, and he curled up in a ball, waiting for the horrible tingling on his skin to go away. When he opened his eyes, he saw the soldier staring, dumbfounded, through the cell door window. Feeling the hard edges of the badge in his hand, he pounded his fist on the floor in victory. He had done it. He could run through doors. He could phase. Chase staggered to his feet and looked in the window of the next cell. The lights inside had been turned off, but he could see a shape of about Mina's size sitting in the corner of the room. He waved the badge at it, hoping it might work from the outside. But the soldier was right. In his hands, it was useless. He gritted his teeth and leaped at the door, grimacing as the same awful sensation passed through him. He fell to his hands and knees and coughed to stop gagging as his numbness began to subside. "What on Hestus 7 Sons?" asked a hoarse voice. With a gasp, Chase looked up. It was Marius, not Mina, who slouched on the floor. One leg extended out, both hands pressed to his side. His face looked scruffy and bruised, but his gleaming eyes were wide open. Had he been in the next cell all along? "I thought they killed you," Chase blurted out. "Not yet," Marius said, sitting up and wincing, "though not for lack of trying. Leonard's been, encouraging me to record a confession. How'd you get through that door?" "This doesn't work," said Chase, holding up the badge. Marius shook his head. "Of course not. All fleet badges are DNA coded. How'd you get it?" Chase stood up, ignoring the question. "Tell me how to open the cell doors." Marius stared at him for a moment, and then got to his feet, hands still pressing tightly against his side. "Use the console at the desk. Access code 0990 should open the screen. It should be easy to figure out from there. What are you doing?" Chase faced the door, taking a few quick breaths to prepare himself. This was getting easier. Getting us all out of here. He ran at the door and jumped. This time, knowing what to expect, he landed on his feet. He leaned over for a second and gave his head a shake. Marius stared out the window in shock. In the other cell, the soldier he had trapped was shouting and pounding on the door. If he had a communicator, he might have already called for help. Someone could walk in at any second and stop them. Chase ran to the console and touched the screen, where a number pad blinked into view. Carefully, he touched the digits 0990, and the screen changed, filling up with a jumble of buttons and commands. Chase looked at Marius's cell window, panicking. "Which do I press?" he shouted. For once he wished Parker was there. Chase forced himself to calm down and analyze the entire screen. Finally, on the right side, he spotted a section marked Units, with buttons marked 1 through 4 underneath. Marius and the guard were in the middle 2 cells, but which of these was 2 and which was 3? He couldn't risk opening the wrong door. After a moment's contemplation, Chase pushed the button marked 1. Mina had to be in either 1 or 4, and once he knew which was which, he'd know the number to Marius's cell. Another screen door popped up with a list of commands, and Chase pressed Open Door. The cell closest to him opened up, so that was cell number 1. "Mina?" Chase called. Nothing. Quickly he opened cells 3 and 4, and Marius rushed to the console. A moment later, Mina walked out of cell 4, calm and collected as ever. "Good job, Chase," she said. He stepped out from behind the desk. "How do we get off the ship?" Marius checked the console. "If we can make it to the lower flight deck, I can get us out of here. We have to move fast. As soon as anyone realizes we've escaped, they'll lock everything down." Chase turned to Mina. "Do you know where to find Parker?" Before she could answer, a low groan came from cell number 1. Everyone turned and looked at the open door. "Parker?" Chase dashed for the cell door, his pulse spiking. If that was Parker, he didn't sound good. What he saw inside the cell stopped him in his tracks. Vaux sat slumped on the bench. There were several crusted gashes in his face, which was malted with green and yellow bruises, and one of his eyes was swollen shut. He bared his teeth and made an ominous rattling sound in the back of his throat. Behind him, Marius cursed loudly and pushed past Chase. "What happened? How did you get here?" Vaux glared at Marius. "After you left, another attack," he croaked. "No escape shuttle. Nataman shipper rescued me. Call fleet for help, and I tell them where to find you." "Where's the silver case?" asked Marius. "The one you took from me." "Gone. He took it." Who? Was it Captain Leonard? Tell me! Marius grabbed Vo's shoulders and pressed him against the wall. Vo gave a hideous scream that cut off in a wet coughing fit, and Marius backed off. When he recovered, Vo eased himself off the bench and onto his feet. You want to know who took Case? Same person that took these, he hissed. Shuffling on his long haunches, Vo turned around. To Chase's horror, on Vo's back, instead of his 4 long golden limbs, there were now 4 bandaged stumps. Vo looked over his shoulder, glaring at Marius. He came for you. Make me suffer. Who? Marius shook his head, his mouth agape. Vo glowed at his as he shuffled back around to face them, and then the folds of his face curled up in a malicious smile. Reiser Benin. He spoke the name slowly, announcing every symbol, which gave a pointed look at Marius. Come to take his revenge for you stealing his money and android. He took Case. Marius brought his hands to the side of his face and groaned. Cursed sons of Hesta. I can't go back and face that man. He'll kill me on sight. Cut off your arms. Vo's voice grew vicious. I hope he cut off every one of your limbs, worthless Karsha swill. Marius spat a few incomprehensible words at Vo and turned away. Let's go, Chase. What about him? Chase gestured at Vo, who, although obviously in a great deal of pain, leaned against the wall with a strangely contented smile on his face. Don't feel too bad for him, Marius said coldly as he turned to leave. He's chartreuse. Those limbs will grow back. Taking one last look at the smuggler, Chase followed him out of the cell. Marius slipped behind the desk and typed something on the console, and both cell doors slid shut. Mina stood by the door. Do you know where to find Parker? He asked. She nodded, reaching for the handle. Try not to attract any attention, said Marius. The standby fighters are staged in the reserve hangar on level J. You've got 5 minutes, or we're leaving without you. Mina walked out the door. All right, let's move fast, Marius said to Chase. He rifled through the guard's desk and withdrew a slender black baton. Just stick close to me. But I'm not a soldier, said Chase. They'll spot me in a second. This ship had a small civilian population. You'll be fine. I know a back hall where we probably won't run into anyone. Keep your head down and walk fast. He opened the door, sticking his head into the hallway before exiting the room. The hall outside the brig was empty, and Marius quickly cut across and into another quiet corridor. They walked swiftly for a minute, heading toward a recessed doorway. Marius reached out for the handle, but the door opened before he could touch it. He jumped back with a salute, dropping his face toward the floor. The young soldier who came through the door began to raise his arm in return, but then he gasped. You! I'm sorry. Marius whipped out the black baton and pressed it against the soldier's neck. It made a sizzling sound, and he tumbled to the floor. Chase stared at the fallen soldier. What did you? Stunned him. He'll be fine, Marius said. Then he led Chase down several flights of steep metal stairs and into a narrower curved hall where the right-hand wall was lined with doors. He stopped at the first one and entered a number code to open it. As they stepped into a dark hangar, Chase could see the sleek lines of the fighter parked inside. Marius approached the Contra quickly and opened the side door. Get in. We have to wait for Mina and Parker. We can't, said Marius. There's no time to wait, but they'll be fine. The fleet isn't after them. They're after you and me. We need to get out of here right now. He grabbed Chase by the upper arm and began to pull him toward the craft. We can't leave them. Chase yanked his arm, wincing at the sharp tingling as he phased through Marius's grip. Marius looked at his hand, then at Chase. How do you do that? What on terras are you? I'm not leaving Parker behind, Chase repeated. No worries, you won't have to, said a voice behind him. With a wary smile on his face, Parker stepped into the docking chamber with Mina, his eyes already on the vehicle. We're stealing a Contra, he breathed, reaching out to touch it. Chase exhaled with relief and stepped aside to usher Parker toward the Contra. Everyone in now, barked Marius. With a boost from Mina, Parker climbed up into the fighter, peering over the vehicle's one seat. Are you joking? We'll never all fit in here. You don't have a choice, Marius said. Hurry up. The crawl space behind the contra seat was barely big enough for one person. They wedged themselves in shoulder to shoulder with their knees drawn up to their chins. Chase had to incline his head at a sharp angle to avoid hitting the metal hull. Marius jumped into the seat and closed the hatch. He drummed his hand against the manual controls as the vehicle powered up. Come on, come on, come on, he muttered. The seconds stretched on, and finally Marius hissed, Yes! They lifted off the deck. It worked, Chase asked. He strained to look over the back of the seat and caught a glimpse of star-spattered space through the front window. We're out, said Marius. We're as good as... Lieutenant Marius, interrupted a furious voice from the front console. What do you think you're doing? Marius veered the fighter out and away from the Kaitastor. Sorry, Captain. Looks like you lose this round. All weaponry is pointed right at you, Lieutenant. You have 10 seconds to surrender, said Leonard. And kill my hostages? I think that's against fleet regulations, isn't it? Are you insane? Leonard roared. Do you realize what you're doing? Yes, I do, said Marius. He was quiet for a moment, tapping at the console. When he spoke again, his voice was low and hard. Just like you knew what you were doing when you sent me to Trucon on that bogus mission. You won't get away with any of this. There was a pause. Don't, came the captain's angry voice over the console. At that moment, Marius launched the fighter into a fold, and they passed out of transmission range. Chapter 20. They reappeared in a quiet segment of space, and after a tenth second, Marius released the breath he had been holding. We did it, he said, sounding fiercely pleased. Hang on a minute while I pilot out of our course. I need to find a plot. Parker leaned toward the front, unintentionally jamming his arm into Chase's side. Where are we going now? What's the plan? He was ghostly pale, and the occasional deep wheeze made it sound like he still had some difficulty breathing. Are you sure you're up for this? Chase asked. Of course, Parker scoffed. Because you look terrible. Parker made a face. It'll take a lot more than a full dose of Gozar poison to keep me down. So what's the plan? As Chase twisted away from Parker's sharp elbow, he realized he hadn't given much thought to where he might find his sister. Quasar was the only place he had seen her, so it seemed only natural to go back and look for her there. When Marius didn't answer, he spoke up. I have to go to Quasar to find my sister. Parker shifted to look at Chase. You're what? Don't worry, came Marius's low mutter from the front. Quasar is where we're headed. Chase paused. He expected Marius to want to go straight to the safety of his homeworld. You're not planning to go after the case, are you? Why wouldn't I? You heard what Vos said. Reiser Benin is out for revenge. He'll kill you. You'll never get the case. Just leave us on Quasar and go back to your people. Go back to my people? Is that an order? Irritation crept into Marius's voice. If I can get that case, I still have a chance to clear my name. And not just that, I can expose whoever it was in Fleet Command that orchestrated the destruction of Trucon. This is my duty as a soldier of the fleet. Chase shook his head. How can Marius still think of himself as a fleet soldier after all that had happened? Parker jabbed him in the shoulder. I'm sorry, you're what? Can you say that again? Sister? It was useless to argue with Marius, so instead Chase turned to Parker. Yes, my sister. You remember when I told you about that girl in the bathroom when you told me I was crazy? He proceeded to repeat what Leonard had said to him about Lily Garrity. That must have been my sister. That's why she was so upset when she saw me, he finished, trying to contort himself into a more comfortable position against Mina, who sat as still and inflexible as a statue. Because she thinks you're dead, just like the captain said. Parker was silent for a moment. How do you think she found you in the first place? I don't know. Chase had gone over the memory so many times in his head that he was able to recite their entire conversation to himself. Wait, there was one thing. She mentioned a name, something like, Doran didn't see you, but I did. Doran? Marius's voice sang out sharply. As in Colonel Eileen Doran? You know who that is? Chase asked. She's the chief medical officer of the
Noxos Vector Command. What does that have to do with you?
I have no idea, Chase began to say.
Of course. Don't you remember, dummy? Parker interrupted. She was the officer running things at the medical center. She put the Lizo band on my forehead after I split it open. The older female office with the baby doll face. Chase gaped at Parker. Do you think... Hold that thought, Chase, Marius said, sitting up from the console. I've got our course entered. Leonard's going to be right on our tail, so I'm going to give it the full push. Things might get a little rough. We're going to get to Quasar in record time. Prepare to fold. Before Chase could utter another word, the universe collapsed around them, and the fighter tore across the galaxy in a dizzying rush, completing each fold nearly on top of the last. Bright objects flashed in the windshield, nearby planets and colored swirls of distant nebula. After an hour or so, Chase began to get a tight headache from all the folding, and his entire body ached from being cramped up for so long. It was still infinitely better than riding in Vo's decrepit shuttle. Then the flashing images stopped, and they were enveloped in darkness again, with only the glow of the console to see by. The vehicle's gravity generator kept them seated, but Chase could feel that the Contra was zooming downward. Gray light filtered in through the front window as they entered the atmosphere of Quasar. I'm sure Leonard put an alert out on this fighter, so I can't land in any standard docking station, said Marius. I'm going to land us at the part in the shank. This will put us close to Riser Benen's lair, so we can get in and out with the case in a hurry. We? Chase pushed the question out of his head and instead tried to think of how he would go about finding his sister. Her final clue, I'm being held by the one who led the end, was not terribly helpful, and a planet was a very large place to be hidden on. Was it possible that she was still in the cafe where she had jumped him? Unlikely, but it maybe was the best place to start. Marius slowed the vehicle, and after a few gentle turns, they settled to a stop. Almost immediately, the hatch popped open. All right, everybody out. Quick, 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 said Marius, exiting the Contra with a fluid jump and leaving Chase and Parker to pull themselves out of their cramped positions and scramble after him. Mina landed beside them with a heavy thump. They walked swiftly through the hectic port, weaving through the tangle of parked vehicles and steaming vents and drawing stares from the raggedy men and creatures who worked there. Fortunately, the contingency of fleet soldiers who had been monitoring the port when they left was no longer there. Marius rested one hand near his hip where he carried the black baton he had taken from the brig. They took a lift up to the street level of the shank, and Marius began to lead the way down a dark alley. Chase stopped. Hang on. Where are we going? Marius glanced back at him with an impatient frown and ushered the group into a recessed doorway. He scanned the three of them. Okay, we need a plan. Mina, you should take Parker out of the shank, somewhere safe. Don't you, Parker began to protest. Marius turned to Chase. You come with me. We'll deal with Riser Benen. What? Asked Chase, raising his voice over Parker's noisy objections. No, I came here to look for my sister. Impatience crossed Marius's face. Leonard is already on his way here, and it's only a matter of time before Vo cracks and tells him about the case. I have to go to get it before he does. But I need to find her, said Chase, wrinkling his brow. Marius's voice dropped low. I don't know if I can do this without you. We'll go look for the girl once we've taken back my case. You mean if we're still alive? If we're not being chased halfway across the galaxy? Chase's temper began to rise. This may be the only chance I have to save her. You don't even know if she's really your sister, Marius said through gritted teeth. Captain Leonard said, you told us he said Chase Garrity had a sister, and he also said Chase Garrity is dead. Look at you. You're not human. You pass through solid objects. How can you think you're really that boy? Chase felt his face growing hot as a tight, angry feeling knit together in his chest. I am. I know it. You realize it's possible you never even saw the girl. Nobody else did they? Parker, did you see her? Her image could have been implanted in your memory as a way to control you. Chase paused, uncertain. Could that be possible? Shut up! Parker stepped forward and shoved Marius in the chest. Stop trying to manipulate him. We saved your life once already, or did you forget that? Marius knocked Parker's hands away. And I'd be back with my people by now if it weren't for you. Parker snorted. You still can. Go back and get the Contra. Get out of here. Don't tell me what to do. Marius grabbed Parker's shirt, and instantly Mina's hand was clamped on his shoulder. He let go, hissing in pain. Stop! Chase shook his head at all three of them. Fighting over what was his decision. Parker, I can take care of this. Marius shook Mina off and turned all his attention on Chase. I'm asking you to trust your gut. Yes, you're special. There's no one like you in the universe. But you have to realize that you can't really be that boy. You're probably walking into a trap. He placed his hands on Chase's shoulders, his dark eyes blazing with purpose. Let's go get that case and tell the universe who was really behind the Trucon attack. Chase put his head down to avoid Marius's I'm sorry. Blah blah blah. Chase put his head down to avoid Marius's staring gaze. On the Kaitastor, he had been so certain he needed to save his sister, but now Marius was messing with his head, and that certainty was crumbling. It felt incredibly selfish to ignore Marius's noble goal in favor of his own possibly imagined one, and for a moment it seemed almost like he had no choice. But he was so close to getting the answers he needed. How could he reach them if Marius made him change his plans? He closed his eyes, and the girl's terrified face flashed before him. Anger pulsed in his veins. Chase raised his head and squared his shoulders. Maybe I'm not Chase Garrity, he said, but I know what I saw, and that girl needs me. If you wait, I promise I'll help you afterward. Marius's face tightened, and with an angry huff, he dropped his hands, backing away. I won't make it to afterward, but I won't waste any more time trying to convince you. Goodbye, Chase. He turned and stalked down the alley, soldier's taunt quickly disappearing into the gloom. Chase turned to Parker. Did I do the right thing? Do you really believe you have a sister out there? Parker asked. Chase bit his lip. Marius had told him to go with his gut on this, and his gut told him that the frantic, desperate girl he had seen needed his help. He nodded and then asked, Do you really think I'm Chase Garrity? Psst, of course. Did you not have a Chase Garrity chip in your head when I first met you? Parker smiled. So how are we going to find this sister of yours? Tell me exactly what she said to you. Every word. Parker, said Mina. He ignored her. Chase racked his brain. She said I should know the safe place, and I should go there and ask for help. And I don't suppose you remember this safe place, do you? Parker looked at him hopefully. No, that would be too easy. What else? Chase dug deeper into his memory. She said, guide the star, like I did. Would be useful if we knew what that meant, Parker squinted. So I guess we go look for this Colonel Dorian. Parker, Mina repeated. He turned to her. How do we find the Fleet Medical Center again? Mina shook her head. It's time for us to go. I'm going to contact Asa now so he can come and pick us up. Absolutely not, Parker narrowed his eyes. You can tell him to come and get us afterward, but first we get Chase's sister. Then we can all go live happily ever after with Asa. Mina frowned. This is not up for debate. We have to leave now. No! Parker raised his hands as if he were about to shove her, but he stopped himself. Look, I'm giving you an order. My life isn't in any danger, so you can't override me. I know you have a map of Quasar somewhere in that postonic brain of yours. So let's go find this Dorian lady and see what she can tell us about Chase's sister. Or tell Asa to come join us if you think he'd like to help. Mina shook her head. He won't come to Quasar himself. It's too dangerous for him. Of course it is, shouted Parker. And we all saw for ourselves on the Kaitastar that Asa Kaplan puts Asa Kaplan first. There was an awkward pause. "Parker, they were going to arrest him," said Chase. "He had to get out of there." "Oh, he had to, huh?" snapped Parker. "He had to abandon me there then, huh? Did he? Just like he's abandoned me my whole life. Why did he even agree to be my guardian? Why didn't he just throw me in an orphanage?" "He wanted to keep you safe," said Mina quietly. "You're very important to him. And he shows that by leaving me stranded on a fleet ship in the hands of a madman. Come on, Mina. You're going to have to try harder to sell me on that one." Parker turned and threw his arm around Chase's shoulders. "Let's go find your sister." Without a glance back at Mina, he raised his voice and added, "You're welcome to come along, but you're not stopping me." Parker started to lead Chase down the alley, and when Chase looked over, Mina was already walking at his side. "The Fleet Medical Center is in the Melion district," she said calmly. "We can take a jet taxi." Chase, Parker, and Mina stood in the shadow of a warehouse across the street from the looming hulk of the Fleet Medical Center, watching the soldiers that marched in and out of the main entrance. "So that's a pretty big place," said Parker. "How on Terra's are we going to find Colonel Dorian in there?" Chase considered this. "She's a doctor. Pretend that we're sick." "You'll end up in an exam room," said Mina, "and in deep trouble when they realize you're faking." Parker looked around at the ground. "Find something to hit me in the head with. I'll tell her the Lizo bin didn't hold." Chase rolled his eyes. "She said something about wanting to send you over to recruiting." "That's right," Parker snapped his finger. "She wanted to recruit all the orphans into the fleet." Chase flinched at the word orphan, thinking of what Leonard had said about his parents, but a sly smile had spread across Parker's face. "We'll go in and tell them we're new recruits, here for our physical exams, and we'll tell them we were instructed specifically to ask for Colonel Dorian." "What about Mina?" Chase asked. "What about you?" Parker turned to face her. "What's your story?" Mina shrugged. "I'm your personal property." "Good enough." Parker started to walk toward the entrance. "And once we're inside, how do we get back out?" Chase asked, jogging after him. Parker flashed him a grin. "I'm counting on you to figure that part out. Hey, so your sister, she can do what you can do? Jump through walls?" Recalling how she had vanished right in front of him, Chase shook his head. "I don't think so. She was just there, and then she wasn't." Parker gave him a strange look as he pulled open the main entrance door. "Whatever, mystery man. Let's do this." The first thing that hit Chase when they walked through the entrance was the noise. Chattering, shouting, wailing. The lobby was even more packed than it had been a few days earlier. The majority of the crowd was still humanoid, but now mixed in was the occasional glimpse of dangling tentacles or glossy black fur. Stressed mothers chased bawling children while scowling seniors hunched on chairs, giving everyone the evil eye. Parker edged his way through the crush to the front desk, where the soldier on duty looked up and narrowed his eyes. Following on jittery legs, Chase didn't know how he was going to pull off lying to the guard. Luckily, he didn't have to. "Brother, we are so late. You gotta help us," trilled Parker in a funny, high accent. Chase had to stop himself from turning to stare at him. The soldier shook his head. "I'm sorry, I don't... Your old lady officer, I can't remember her name. Domain. She helped us out with some wound control back on T-Day and said we had to come here and report to her. I guess it was yesterday? Day before? I don't know, brother. Time has gotten so mixed up since this whole thing went down. And today somebody found my android. Can you believe it? My freaking android and all this. But man, we're so done because we totally missed the appointment for our physical. And your lady Doskin seemed really interested in recruiting us and... Shut up, snapped the soldier. Chase blanched as the man whipped out a handheld console and scrolled through the screen. He was probably calling for security to come and take them into custody. He nudged Parker on the arm and preparing to turn and race for the doors. The soldier looked up again with a sour expression. "Physicals are taking place on the 8th floor. Elevators are over there. You can find the way yourselves." "Oh, brother, thank you so much," said Parker, taking a step away from the desk. "And this lady officer, Dalton?" "Dorian," said the soldier. Yes. Where can we find her to apologize?" "If she wants to see you, she'll find you." The soldier turned to the next group and started barking orders. They backed away and headed for the elevators. "This place is a mess," said Parker in a low voice. "Are all these people refugees from TrueCon?" asked Chase. "The news said 3 million people were displaced." Parker shook his head. "And Quasar isn't big enough to handle them all." They took an elevator up to the 8th floor, where Chase approached a tired-looking orderly and asked where they could find Colonel Dorian. The orderly told them her facilities were on the 20th floor before heaving himself up to his feet and plodding away. The elevator would only take them as far as the 17th floor, but they had Mina break open a stairwell door and climb the last 4 floors. They hung back by the stairwell, scoping out the situation. The halls on the 20th floor were white and sterile, and only a few hospital staff patrolled this area. "Stay here," whispered Chase, stepping out into the hallway. "Forget it," said Parker. They slipped down the hall with Mina following like a guard dog, pressing themselves into the doorways to avoid crossing paths with any of the hospital staff. In the end, Colonel Dorian's office wasn't hard to find. It was the one she was standing outside of. Chase recognized her broad, rosy face and bobbed blonde hair from their brief interaction at the refugee registration. She was discussing something with another officer, waving her hand around as though she were describing something large. Another soldier approached them and said something in a low murmur. "What?" Dorian's sharp voice echoed down the hall, carrying her evident displeasure with it. Chase pulled his head back slightly, his head pounding. Had someone spotted them? A moment later, she led the 2 officers away, and they vanished around a corner. Chase waited for a few moments and turned back to Parker and Mina. "Come on," he whispered, and ran down the hall to Dorian's office. The door was locked. Without a word, Chase lowered his head and jumped through, shaking off the tingling sensation with a shudder. It was a sleek room, lined with tall cabinets and a console-topped desk square in the middle. He unlocked the door for Mina and Parker, who stared at him in awe. "Just start looking for anything you can find about a girl. Her name is Lily Garrity." Chase began shifting through all the cabinets, finding mostly books and medical supplies. He wasn't even sure what he was looking for. Mina sorted through objects in a storage room in the back of the office, while Parker tried to hack into the desk console. "Shh!" Mina stepped out of the supply closet, her head cocked. A second later, Chase heard the voices approaching in the hallway. "Hide!" he whispered. Mina pulled Parker into the storage room, but there was no room for Chase. He climbed inside a cabinet, leaving the sliding door cracked just enough so that he could see out. The hallway door opened, and Colonel Dorian entered, her face twisted in a furious scowl. "How dare you come here? What were you thinking?" Chase frowned when he saw the towering man-beast who entered Dorian. Ratty knots of hair hung around a face that was covered with a jumble of tattoos. Chase's mind raced, trying to remember where he had seen the man before. A heavy musk scent filled Chase's nose. He smelled this somewhere else, he was certain. "I told you he couldn't be reached, and I had nowhere else to bring this. I'm not carrying it around any longer." With an animal snarl, the man pulled something from a satchel slung across his chest and slapped it down on Dorian's desk with a crack. "Drat it, Fursad! Would you be careful?" said Dorian. She picked up the object and rubbed her sleek desktop. "Tell me you at least found the Liolian." A rushing sound filled Chase's ears as he stared at the slim silver object in her hand. Vo had lied. Reiser Benin didn't have Marius's case. The fleet did. That's the end of chapter 20. So next week we'll read 2 more chapters, 21 and 22, and then the following week we'll finish the book. I can't wait to see what happens, whether they realize Chase is in the office, or if they get the case back, or Marius shows up. There's a lot of stuff that could happen. So thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.